and welcome whether you're here on Zoom or watching our YouTube channel, or maybe even watching the recording of this event. We are so glad that you're here with us as we are celebrating this year's 2024 recipients of the Linda G. O'Brien Noetic Sciences Research Prize. This annual $100,000 award recognizes groundbreaking research on non-local consciousness. So we are looking forward to diving in and going into this exciting program. And before we get started, I have just a few announcements. The first is that as a scientific nonprofit, our funding is almost entirely from memberships and donations. So we are grateful for all of your support. And if you're not a member, ION's membership starts at just $60 per year with a variety of benefits depending on your donation level, offering you at the basic level access to hundreds of hours of video recordings, to the circle level membership, which includes small group gatherings and discussions. So you can learn more about our membership or make a one-time donation at the link noetic.org/give. Okay, so I'm going to give just a high-level overview of our time together. First, we'll hear from ION's Chief Scientist, Dr. Dean Radin, about this year's Linda G. O'Brien Research Prize and why theories of non-local consciousness are so important to IONs and to advancing consciousness research in general. Then ION scientist Dr. Arno Delorme will take the virtual stage to discuss the details of this year's prize and how the finalists were selected. We will then get to see a special video of Linda G. O'Brien herself about her relationship with Noetic Sciences and why she created this incredible prize. After that, ION's Director of Research, Dr. Helene Wabe, will be introducing this year's prize recipients. And we'll get to hear from each of the winners, who will be sharing highlights from their reviews and expanding on these non-local theories and explore the profound implications. And after each of them presents, we'll have a chance to be in panel discussion led by Dr. Helene Wabe. And finally, we'll conclude our time together with remarks from ION's President, Dr. Thomas Brophy, and ION's Board Chair, Claudia Wells. So as you can see, we have an incredible program for us and a really celebratory moment as we are announcing our winners of this year's prize. So let's dive in, and please join me in welcoming ION's Chief Scientist, Dr. Dean Radin, to the virtual stage. Thanks, Dean, for being with us, and take it away.
Thank you, Andrea. Welcome to our program announcing the second annual Linda G. O'Brien Noetic Sciences Research Prize. This prize plays an integral role in ION's mission to encourage creative and leading-edge approaches to the scientific investigation of consciousness. This year's prize focuses on a review and comparative analysis of theories of non-local consciousness. By consciousness, we mean both first-person phenomenal awareness and also agency. That is, we know that we're aware that we have subjective experience, and we also feel that we have free will, at least some of the time, like when we find ourselves eating a second cookie when we know we shouldn't be eating any cookies. That's not exactly free will. Non-local consciousness refers to the idea that consciousness extends beyond the brain and body, and even beyond the boundaries of ordinary space and time. It also includes the idea that we can mentally influence aspects of the physical world at a distance. We know that non-local consciousness exists through endless personal anecdotes that have been confirmed over a century of systematic scientific research. We also know that the variety of ideas about consciousness that are being discussed by scientists and scholars today include what is euphemistically called anomalous states of consciousness, and that they are worthy of serious consideration. That provides an opening to a broader consideration of non-local consciousness, and it's a clear recognition of the kind of work that IONs and our colleagues around the world have been contributing to this discussion. But non-local consciousness remains a significant challenge to the conventional idea that consciousness somehow emerges out of brain activity. There are many theories about how 3 pounds of neural tissue inside your head can give rise to subjective awareness, but the reality is that no one knows how a physical object can give rise to a non-physical experience. A philosopher might say that if you keep asking the same question, but you're not making any progress on it, then maybe your question is a category mistake, like asking, what is the square root of an orange? If that's the case here, then maybe one or more of our starting assumptions are incorrect. So why is it important to re-examine our assumptions about the nature of consciousness? One reason is that modern civilization is largely based on those assumptions. So if we've been barking up the wrong tree, then maybe some of the global crises that we face, like climate change, are due to those faulty assumptions. Another reason is the current worldview of materialism is a philosophy of nihilism. It says there is no meaning, no purpose, no destiny. It's all based on randomness. Interesting concepts like spirituality or reports about mystical experience are then due only to psychological frailties and are considered sheer nonsense. Nihilism gives rise to the idea, to the saying that he who dies with the most toys wins. As a philosophy, you can see how that promotes selfishness and greed, and we see the consequences of that behavior in the world today. A third and very important reason to look at the assumptions about consciousness is that people who experience non-local consciousness, whether through meditation, psychedelics, a near-death or psychic experience, or the effect of seeing the Earth from space, which has influenced many astronauts, including our founder, Edgar Mitchell, or some other transformative experience, almost always end up becoming more empathetic, compassionate, and interested in helping others. So it would be a very good idea if we understood more about why a change in consciousness leads to these pro-social behaviors. So with that as a brief introduction, I will now turn over the mic to our Director of Research, Helene Wabe, who will offer her perspective on why this prize is so unique and important. Helene.
Thank you so much, Dean. I really appreciate you giving us that background. I wanted to just touch on one more piece, which was a significant motivator for this particular year's prize, which was to address the frequent criticism that the field of non-local consciousness lacks theories of psi phenomenon. This criticism is completely unfounded. In reality, there are numerous theories of non-local consciousness, which can be overwhelming and difficult to navigate. Also, some of the theories are developed in isolation, with their originators considering them out of context without integrating or comparing them with others. And so with this year's prize, we really aim to compare, contrast, and possibly even synthesize some of the numerous theories of non-local consciousness, highlighting if and how these theories could potentially be tested. So I'm going to pass it now to our scientist, Arnaud Delorme, who's going to share a little bit more about this year's prize and how it worked. Arnaud?
Thank you, Elane. So how did we select the winner? First, we had six different judging criteria. And the first one was comprehensive coverage. We wanted as many theories as possible to be included. Modern theory, ancient theory. So all the theory possible have a coverage that's as best coverage as possible. Second, we wanted a critical analysis. So we wanted the authors to include the strength and weaknesses of these theories, and also, very importantly, empirical support for each theory. We also wanted a comparative scope, meaning we just didn't want a list of all the theory like an encyclopedia. We wanted the author to compare and contrast each of the theory, put them in a class of theory, similar theories, and also assess their philosophical base when there was one. And fourth, we wanted also empirical application. So we wanted the author to venture, can this be tested? Would you propose some experiment to test this theory? Obviously not going into all the details, but just whether assessing whether this can be tested. Fifth, we wanted clarity and accessibility. We didn't want the review to just be for experts and read by just a few people. We wanted the general public to be able to read these reviews. And finally, we wanted originality. Just surprise us, make lots of tables, lots of graphics, trying to compare and contrast all the theories. So we had a two-phase selection process. In phase one, we asked the general scientific community to submit letter of intent. And we had 21 high quality letter of intents. We had more than that, but some were removed because they didn't meet some criteria. And all of our judges, so we had 8 judges, 4 from IONS and 4 external judges, ranked all the 21. And then we had to do something complex because we're scientists. So we summed the rank and we selected the 5 with the highest rank, and then we discussed these in depth, and finally selected 3 finalists. And all the judging was blind, meaning that no one knew the authors, so they couldn't look them up on the internet to make their choice. And then in phase 2, with these 3 finalists, so we invited them to submit a comprehensive review of 10,000 words, and 10,000 words was the minimum. One of them submitted 250 pages document, which you will be able to read on ION's website. The judging was blind as well, meaning that the judge were not aware of the submission, although often they could guess it, but at least at the very beginning, they're not aware of it. And also, as you'll see, the prize was not distributed equally. So we have 3 winners, and I'm not going to mention them right now. It's going to come in a few minutes. But why did we have 3 winners? Well, we encourage the diversity of ideas. As you'll see, the reviews are very different in their scope, in their style of presentation. So we thought it was appropriate to present, different approach to the problem. Also, all the authors worked really hard on their review, several months, full time, and the quality of the submission we got was outstanding. I personally learned so much reading this review, even though I've been working in the field for almost 15 years. So we thought, okay, everybody should get something. And the prize amount for each participant was debated by the jury to align with the essay quality and their reference to, the 6 criteria I mentioned earlier. So the jury was unanimous on the final distribution and ranking. And now, before we get the actual winner, we have a video featuring Linda G. O'Brien. Thanks to Linda, vision and dedication, this award has become reality, and we're so grateful to Linda for her support. So let's take a look at the video.
I think everyone has their own reason to join a particular group of people. And for me, it was the scientific exploration of the mind. Our scientists need support to make sure we uncover what we can in this generation and generations to come. So I thought this was a good way to keep scientific exploration on their toes, because I know scientists are not the wealthiest people in the world, but to me, they're the explorers of our generation. So to know that this is an institution that has a group of scientists that are working in our best interests to know more about the universe, about us, about how we work in this universe. I want to support their scientific endeavors. I'm passionate that we still have scientists exploring things that we don't understand. This group of people, they build on the past and they look to the future of what can be. Because it was so special in my life, I wanted to thank the scientists who are working with IONS to explore new territory all the time and make sure that that continues into the future. I think we are limitless.
deep, deep gratitude to Linda, without whom this prize could not be possible. Thank you so much, Linda. And without further ado, on behalf of IONS, I would like to congratulate the winners of the Linda G. O'Brien 2024 Noetic Sciences Research Prize. In third place, and for $20,000, we have Cameron Alldredge, Breaking the Boundaries of the Brain.
Excellent. I will share my
Not quite yet.
Yo.
Do you want to hold
Oh,
your
yeah.
prize up?
Yes, here it is.
Thank you. I'm going to announce everybody
All the
first,
rest
and
of
then
them.
we'll move into presentations.
Sounds
And
great.
in second place, and for a $30,000 prize, we have Michael Nahm, The Arcane Nexus, Assessing the Roots of Non-Local Consciousness. Congratulations. And then in first place, and for a $50,000 prize, we have Mike Daw and Chris Roe, Theories of Non-Local Consciousness, a review and framework for building rigor. Congratulations to all of you. See all the wonderful applause and emojis coming up for all of you. Incredibly, incredibly well done. And so now I'm very excited to be able to hear from each one of you, giving an overview of the work that you did in terms of synthesizing these theories. So we're going to go from third to second to first. So first up, we're going to hear from Cameron. Take it away, Cameron.
Thank you. I am incredibly honored to share with everybody what I found. And I consider a lot of the people here my academic heroes. So without further ado, I'm going to briefly go over what I did for my project. So some of the key theories that I looked at, they came from a very wonderful resource, A Landscape of Consciousness. This is a fantastic, almost encyclopedia of all the different theories of consciousness. And I picked and chose from this the ones that interested me the most, that I found the most benefit from. And combining with that, another fantastic resource, you probably recognize a lot of the authors on this one, and another wonderful place to find different theories of consciousness, and especially non-local consciousness. So some of the next few slides I'm going to show are little excerpts from the document that I shared for my submission. And I really tried to emphasize aesthetic and really simplify a lot of the different theories, because it's pretty difficult to navigate, I found. So just putting them into broad categories, and then with those broad categories, looking at the differences even within the same overarching frameworks. And then I made this fun little figure to really boil down the theories that I found most helpful, and a way to synthesize multiple theories into one, basically a super theory. So a big part of that, and this is what I'm going to emphasize in just a few moments, is this area, talking about some relationships between two main categories of theories and how they can synthesize to improve our understanding of non-local consciousness. So what I found, and the important elements of my submission, were looking at ancient and esoteric ideas and how those relate, and the similarities and differences with the more modern theories, and more accurately, the overarching frameworks of those theories. I also identified 6 problems that some specific categories of theories have, as well as all theories together, all combined, things that they share as far as obstacles that they need to overcome, so that there's more empirical validation and more, or I guess, greater understanding of these non-local consciousness phenomena. Really, it came to this pinnacle where I identified 8 common elements among all the different theories that I looked at. So finding that they all kind of boiled down to these 8 different things. Not every theory had all 8 of these, but it seemed that all of them, in some sense, had one of these 8 common elements. And so with that, I outlined what it proposes as far as our non-local consciousness goes and how it all fits together. And then I made this squirrely looking figure. I'd made this by hand, trying to find how each of these different theories I was looking at, how they boil down in these 8 categories. And because I was dissatisfied with how this one turned out, I made it a little more simple to look at and combine all the theories that I really did an in-depth analysis of to look at how they share these different 8 common elements. That leads to innovation and testing. So I know that a lot of these theories, they share a common problem, which is that they're difficult to prove. Maybe they're not falsifiable, or we don't have the right scientific instruments to really measure or determine whether they are accurate. And so I did a small survey among colleagues and friends. I gave them different explanations of these theories and had them rate, how well they understood the theory, like how understandable is it for the general population, and then how testable is that theory according to their opinion. And so this is another brief figure that I made, but what I want to emphasize here is I wanted to be more novel in my approach, kind of combining these theories, talking about their intersections and what that means for future testing. So looking in this area specifically, I'm going to just emphasize 2 points. And that first one is I'm really drawn to this idea, and I made it up. That's why it's in quotes: constitutive cosmopanpsychism, which is just a garbly-goop term to talk about how I view consciousness. And then the 0-point field theory, which is these two, while they are perhaps separate in what they describe or how they are formed, I believe that they actually work really well. There's a good synthesis between these two. And it all boils down to this idea that all living beings are merely dissociated mental complexes of the universal mind. Building off that, I thought, I really resonate with this idea that our consciousness is perhaps part of a greater whole, some ultimate reality. There's many different ways that cultures and traditions have described this. And so I thought that there's got to be that same blueprint of existence within ourselves, within our own consciousness. So that brings to consciousness is fundamental and universal. And the consciousness we experience as human beings is the result of smaller conscious entities combining to form a higher level unified consciousness. So the same way that we combine to create a unified consciousness, a universal consciousness, we have that within ourselves, just on a smaller level. And so there have been some fantastic scientists who have called these conscious units. And in my project, I give them my own term and talk about them personally. And this idea that there are these little bits of, independently existing entities of consciousness that make up who we are really resonated with me. And I was blown away by how many times that showed up in some of these theories. So how that relates to the 0-point theory is the 0-point theory, the 0-point field contains the potential information, all the potential information in the universe. It is a quantum-based fundamental energy field that carries consciousness, and innately, the brain's filtering system only allows limited access to this field. So the way that I like to think about it is, if our consciousness is made up of all these different little entities, I know that IONS just actually had a webinar about non-physical beings. I think that fits in perfectly here. There's so many even psychotherapies that go on this, like parts therapy, internal family systems, all these different ideas that boil down to the same concept that there are these little, and I guess I don't know if I call them little, but there's entities that are conscious and independent that combine to create a unified consciousness, which is what we experience. And so the way, and you can watch it on the screen here, the way that it relates to 0-point field theory is, I think those create the actual fabric of the field. It's on that level that we are connected to the greater the universal or cosmic consciousness. And so that is how these different psi phenomena are even possible, is because of this field, and the field is made up of these conscious units. So in the last few minutes, I've identified two problems that we need to overcome as we test this theory. And I call them the two F's, which is filtration and free will. So filtration is this idea that if we want to have access to the 0-point field, or this universal consciousness, we have a problem, which is our brain's filtration system, which is going to impede that connection or being able to be in touch with that. So I find that non-ordinary states of consciousness is a method to get rid of that and then have that direct access there, or basically bypass that filtration system. That allows us to access the 0-point field and that unified consciousness. One really good way to do this, I mean, there's so many, but meditation, hypnosis, there's use of psychedelic substances. Those are methods to bypass that filtration. This also allows us to have direct contact with these conscious units, so we can literally communicate directly to them. They can respond on a level that is comprehensible for us, and that's the filtration. And finally, I'm going to end with free will, which is this idea that when we are testing things beyond ourselves, there's this idea that we're going to run into the free will of these other conscious units. So I'm out of time, but basically setting up a study where you have different conditions, looking at psi phenomena and finding which one is best. So here are the conclusions. I'm just going to put them on the screen for you. I feel like my project addressed very well how the theories relate to each other, the intersections, how they can be combined. I proposed a novel conceptualization, and then based on that conceptualization, and I explained psi phenomena and identified two problems for testing, as well as possible solutions for those problems. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Cameron. That was fantastic. I also want to make it known that all of these papers are going to be posted on our website, so they will be available for people to read. So that'll be a great resource to dive more deeply into these. I know we're just giving a short overview here. So thank you again, Cameron. So next up, we're going to hear from Michael Nahm. You are up.
It says I have no access to share my screen.
Great. We'll work on that on the back end.
Okay, you should be able to share now. Let's try. Perfect.
Do you see it?
We do.
All right. You see the full screen now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So thank you very much. It's, of course, for me also, like for Cameron, a big honor to be here. I'm thankful to be able to speak about my essay, which I entitled The Arcane Nexus, Assessing the Roots of Non-Local Consciousness. I'll be losing a few words on that in the next few minutes. So, and also relating it to the different tasks that we had and what I made of it. So regarding the coverage, we were supposed to cover a broad range of ancient and modern scientific theories of non-local consciousness. As it was already stated, the essay should be longer than 10,000 words, but there was no upper limit. That meant we could go as long as we deemed it necessary and to create an essay that was publishable as a monograph. So in my case, my essay amounted to 60,800 words. And in the format that I chose, it amounted to 215 pages. So I think at least in this criterion, my essay fared fairly well, and I will be, of course, only be able to scratching the surface of my monograph a little bit. We were also supposed to examine theories in the light of supporting empirical evidence for non-local consciousness. And I identified, or I argued, that the best empirical evidence for non-local consciousness are, for example, near-death experiences, including OBEs in near-death states, reincarnation cases, meaning that young children speak about having lived before and provide verifiable evidence about this supposed previous life, such as in this case. Shared dreams, a little known but very peculiar phenomenon in which two or more people share the same dream, remember the same dream, remember having shared it. Very important for thinking about what our normal reality might be like. And I also included macro PK as one of the decisive empirical evidence that theories of non-local consciousness must be able to cover or explain, such as moving compass needles or spoon bending, whatever. Dean knows about spoon bending very well, for example. Another task was to classify theories of non-local consciousness by type. So this is a selection of theories that I chose. I covered theories from indigenous peoples, Asian esoteric traditions of the 19th century, and then more recent theories of the 20th and 21st centuries, such as psychological theories, field theories, hyperdimensional theories. In these cases, the authors assume that in addition to the normal dimensions making up our everyday life, we have kind of a fifth or sixth added dimensions of reality, and that these added dimensions of reality are of increasingly mind-like or mind-related quality, thereby enabling non-local consciousness to occur. Then there are, let's say, two families of quantum physics-based theories. One concern the microscopic level alone on which these quantum processes are supposed to take place, and the other family kind of upscales these microscopic quantum processes in such a way that it is postulated they also occur in our everyday environment on the macroscopic scale, what leads to quite some intriguing implications and essentially also to incompatibilities with other theories. Nevertheless, looking at all these different theories, even though there are some incompatibilities, I identified a very prominent common element in all of them. And this is the tenet that the world as we know it is only a small excerpt of reality. It's a tip of the iceberg. There is a hidden non-physical background on which everything that we perceive with the biological senses rests. This is a little illustration showing this. We as individuals, we live in our world, perceive ourselves as being separated from other individuals and maybe from the world at large. But on this hidden background, there is what I call this arcane nexus in which beings and maybe all of existence is somehow linked. And this is also the level that is mediating non-local consciousness phenomena. This is the cover image of my essay, and it basically illustrates the same thing. You have some everyday phenomena in life, organisms, human beings, animals, plants, and they are sort of emanating, radiating from out of this arcane nexus in the background. We were all, supposed to classify these theories by type, and I would like to lose a few more words on more recent theories, the yellow highlighted ones here. I did that already a little bit in a publication 2 years ago about what I call the parapsychological synthesis, in which I already attempted to highlight that these theories can probably be combined to form an overarching framework for theories of non-local consciousness, because there are these commonalities. They all rest on the arcane nexus, and previous authors have more focused on the incompatibilities and differences between those theories. So I recommend reading this paper along with my essay. And for example, regarding psychological theories, they barely make strong statements about the nature of the universe, of the world. They are more concerned with psychological factors or elements that are shaping, influencing non-local consciousness experiences, but they don't also make much claims about the way that the mind and the brain, for example, interact. So they are very general with regard to these issues and can form kind of an overarching frame. These quantum physical theories I mentioned earlier, they are more concerned with the question of how mind and brain are related, mind and matter are related, so they can be integrated in these psychological theories because they are they cover contexts that are not covered in the other theories, largely. The same applies to hyperdimensional theories. They also make not much claims about how the mind and the brain interact or about psychological factors, whereas the other theories are not so much concerned with the nature of the universe, the structure of the world. This is something that hyperdimensional theories do address. And they all rest on the arcane nexus, if you like. And then there are also field theories, which can again be incorporated quite nicely into these other frameworks. So if you see it in this way, you can find that there is the possibility to frame the different existing theories depending on their context in this kind of a nested hierarchy according to what they focus on. All right. We were also supposed to propose empirical tests that could adjudicate between different rivaling theories. And I chose to propose tests regarding the most decisive theories, in my opinion. These are the two quantum physics-based families of theories. So I won't go into detail regarding these tests in my talk now, but you can read about that in my essay. I only want to make the point that I suggest that the best way to assess theories of non-local consciousness is working with gifted individuals. Finally, we were also supposed to propose something new, original material for advancing theories of non-local consciousness. In this respect, I argued that in order to understand non-local consciousness, but also life as a whole, we need to revitalize and advance added forms of causation in nature. So if you take this image of the arcane nexus again, what science usually does is we or they look at the world we usually perceive. We have this nicely framed concept of time and space and past and present, and then we have a cause and effect that are aligned from past to present, like one billiard ball moves the other billiard ball. And this is also how organisms are conceived. It's a very complex matter of cause and effect of little billiard balls moving around in our bodies. But I believe that this is profoundly mistaken to try to explain the world in this way, because there is so much more to it. And this more originates from the arcane nexus and requires to introduce added and novel forms of causation that are actually quite ancient, but we have to adapt them and to advance them into novel modern scientific concepts. And only then, in my opinion, will it be possible to understand as best as possible what non-local consciousness and actually all life is about. All right, so this was my scratching on my monograph, and I'm thankful for your attention.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. And so now, last but not least, we pass it to Mike Daw and Chris Roe.
Thank you. I shall also just share my screen. Sorry, I couldn't locate it there. So thank you very much, Helene. For start, let's say it's an honor to receive the award, particularly from such an esteemed panel. And whilst it was hard work, I think I could speak for Chris as well. We found the exercise very enjoyable and stimulating. And regarding Chris, he is actually away from home at the moment, so his internet is not as good as it might be. So it's mostly me you're going to be hearing from, although I hope you'll also hear a little bit from Chris as well. So our essay is a review of theories of non-local consciousness, but it's also a proposal for a framework for building rigor. So I'm going to go through the main elements of our theory. So we considered 15 theories of consciousness as a sort of illustrative selection, as well as the theories of non-local consciousness in these categories: quantum, hyperdimensional fields, everywhere, and all there is. We also look at physicalist theories of consciousness in brief as well. So that covers the range of our theories. So in terms of physicalist theories, the first, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but the first three of these theories that you can see are really based on sort of neuroscientific theories of the brain, looking at brain regions, looking at the interactions between neurons, etc. The final one, integrated information theory, is where consciousness is related to the amount of information that systems can generate. And whilst these theories are mainstream and sort of orthodox in terms of the sort of mainstream scientific community, we feel they were found wanting in some respects. So they mostly involve post hoc interpretations of empirical work. They have inconsistent definitions of consciousness that they account for. And in fact, they could probably provide no explanation for any conscious experience, which is kind of ironic for a theory of consciousness. And finally, they're overwhelmingly anthropocentric. They're mostly based on the human brain. That's their kind of framework. That's their starting point in the main. In terms of theories of non-local consciousness, we considered these four. So Stapp and Kaufman and Radin really look at the sort of Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, which has an invocation of an observer or a measurement that collapses the wave function. Federico Fagin proposes this idea of consciousness as quantum information, and Hameroff and Penrose suggest that consciousness is a collapse of the wave function in microtubules. We also look at Bernard Carr's hyperdimensional theory, where consciousness occupies higher dimensions of space, each with its own granulation of time. We look at field theories of consciousness, Diane Hennessy, who suggests consciousness is electromagnetic, and Rupert Sheldrake, who suggests consciousness is found in morphic fields. We look at theories where consciousness is supposed to be everywhere. Philip Goff, who proposes a cosmological consciousness that is a field that permeates everything. And Max Fellmans, who suggests that organisms exist for consciousness to witness itself, which is kind of reminiscent of some Eastern traditions. We consider theories by people who suggest that consciousness is all there is. So Bernardo Kastrup, who suggests that individual living organisms are dissociations within consciousness. Don Hoffman, who proposes that there are conscious agents outside of space-time that give rise to everything, whether physical or mental. So that's a very brief overview of the 15 theories of consciousness we considered. So in terms of looking at these, we suggest that theories of consciousness should, if they're good theories of consciousness, they should account for defining properties of consciousness. They should account for disturbing or anomalous phenomena, and they should be good scientific theories. So let's unpack that a little. So in terms of properties of consciousness, we propose the following, what we call defining properties of consciousness that we felt every theory should account for. So these are that consciousness is felt as private and personal and unitary, that we have subjective experiences or qualia, that we have distinct states of consciousness like sleeping and waking, so-called zombie problem, which really is a question of why consciousness need exist at all. Why are we not just why are there just not organisms and entities going around without any consciousness at all? The free will problem, we seem to be able to make meaningful decisions that have impacts in the world. So a theory of consciousness should either account for that or at least persuasively discount it. Theories of consciousness finally should differentiate between or provide a means for differentiating between conscious and non-conscious entities. We also highlight what we call disturbing phenomena. Now, we call them disturbing phenomena after Alan Turing, who said, when he was talking about telepathy in particular, he said, these disturbing phenomena seem to deny all our usual scientific ideas. And we quite like the term We adopted that term because partly because one definition of disturb is to upset the normal arrangement of something. In other words, the sort of dominant physicalist worldview. So we talked about consciousness in terms of four main categories, if you like. So we think there's a lot of evidence, overwhelming evidence, in fact, that consciousness can exist independently of the brain. We look at the evidence from near-death experiences, terminal lucidity, and brain impairment. Consciousness can be disembodied. We look at the evidence from after-death communications, mediumship, and reincarnation. Consciousness can also be unconstrained by space and time, and we look at the evidence, for example, from telepathy, clairvoyance, and precognition. And also consciousness can influence matter directly, and we look at the evidence from psychokinesis and energy healing. But these theories of consciousness ought to be also good scientific theories. Now, what do we mean by that? In other words, they should be able to they should be efficient and succinct in how they tackle this problem of consciousness. They should be comprehensive in that they can explain a wide range of observations. They should be falsifiable in that they should make predictions that might not be confirmed through an experiment. And they should be surprising in some extent. They should point to unexpected characteristics, point to neglected or unanticipated properties, and they should be directive, in other words, amenable to a program of research. Our essay also provides a comparative analysis between all the theories of consciousness we reviewed, both in terms of defining properties of consciousness in this table and disturbing phenomena. You'll be relieved to hear I'm not going to go through this now, but read the essay and see what we said. And also in terms of how well they meet the criteria of a good scientific theory, as in this table. So what were our conclusions? So firstly, we suggest that no theory that we looked at, physicalist or non-local, sufficiently accounts for properties of consciousness, or at least not all properties of consciousness. Perhaps unsurprisingly, physicalist theories cannot, even in principle, account for disturbing phenomena. However, non-local theories also fell short, in our opinion. Physicalist theories are generally better as scientific theories, although some theories of non-local consciousness also fare well in this respect. For example, Hammeroff and Penrose, Hennessy, Sheldrake, Hoffman, and perhaps Kastrup as well. So what do we propose to advance the field? So we look at two main avenues. The first is around integrating theories of consciousness. So we've looked at lots of different types of theories, but we believe that theories are not necessarily mutually exclusive. And in fact, they may even explain different aspects of consciousness, and that these theories could in fact complement each other. For example, physicalist theories, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. They may not be able to explain disturbing phenomena and so on, but they could help explain mechanisms for consciousness within the brain. Quantum hyperdimensional field theories may all contribute to explaining the interface between a fundamental consciousness and the physical. So this is kind of a very broad model. We don't know how that would work, but we suggest that this integration should be something that is actively looked at. But we also think it's important to be able to test these theories of consciousness. Most theorists of non-local consciousness focus on providing evidence against physicalism, but this is mostly, we believe, at the expense of proposing tests for aspects of their own theory. There are some notable exceptions, so Dean Radin's test for whether the brain needs to experience its own quantum entangled future for precognition to work, and Stephen Schwartz testing whether ESP can work underwater that shields electromagnetic waves. And we also propose two tests of our own. So one a bit more specific, perhaps testing the brain as filter theory for ESP, but also perhaps a broad research program similar to what Michael Nahm was suggesting, looking at autistic virtuosi. So in other words, non-verbal autistic children who Diane Hennessy and others seem to be able to exhibit telepathy and other disturbing phenomena or anomalous phenomena with perhaps very high levels of accuracy. So this could test brain-based parapsychological aspects of consciousness. So thank you for your attention. If you like what you hear, please read the essay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael, and congratulations again to all of you. It was no small feat to create those reviews, and we're very excited to share that with everybody. So now we have a wonderful opportunity to have us all connect together on a panel. And I'm going to ask each of you the same question, and you'll have about 6 minutes each to answer that. And perhaps we'll have a little time afterwards even to connect with everybody together. So here's the question. Based on what you have learned from the experience of writing the review, what do you think are the most important or impactful next steps that we could take to move this work forward? And I'll go backwards and start with Mike, Daw, and Chris Roe.
Thanks, Helene. Though I was relying on us being last, but never mind. We'll see how we go. So I think building on what we said during our essay around this idea of integration and empirical tests, which are really important. I think what we propose is something like a conference. I think people need to get together. I mean, one of the suggestions for the essay guidelines was that we actually propose empirical tests and we propose ways to integrate theories and move them forward. But we felt that the theories that we read were needed a lot of work really from the people who initiate them and perhaps from the community at large. So I think people need to get together. I think a framework is useful, this idea of integration and the need to propose empirical tests. But I think people need to get together and perhaps come together in teams of theorists and parapsychologists, because I think parapsychology is key here. We think parapsychology is key here to really addressing and looking at different aspects of these theories to see whether they pass muster and so on. I think we should engage, or at least attempt to engage, with physicalist theories of consciousness. So that might be hard given past, with the skepticism in the sort of physicalist mainstream scientific community, but nevertheless, perhaps around theories of consciousness, this is an opportunity to engage anew, really, because we do need neuroscience, we do need physicists really to help with this exercise. I think I'm right in speaking for Chris and I, both sort of felt that these theories of non-local consciousness, they're quite speculative, really. They kind of lack precision. And as I said in the presentation, I think a lot of these theories spend a lot of their time when they're talking about the theories on bashing physicalism, and quite rightly because of these anomalous phenomena, but then less time really on building empirical tests for their own theories. To do all this, we need major research programs and money, I guess, which that lies behind this. Chris.
Yeah, I think we also felt that there was a lack of clarity with the theories of non-local consciousness. I think physicalist theories had the luxury of being able to assume their metaphysics, and the non-local theories spent a lot of time railing against that prevailing context, and spent less time then thinking, well, what exactly is this theory intended to account for? What is it supposed to explain or describe? So they failed to map out the properties of consciousness in a way that made sense, coherent sense. And secondly, they didn't seem to have a clear idea of what their theories were for. So what was the purpose of theories, particularly from a scientific perspective, in terms of clarifying issues, identifying tensions that might be explored empirically, and driving research forwards? So both of those we felt were missing at the moment, but absolutely represent an opportunity then for focus going forwards.
I think I was struck by so Don Hoffman, who I think was one of the winners last year, but his theory of consciousness, which we considered around perception, he used this phrase in Tucson when he was speaking. He talked about a hand wave, and he was very critical of theories that are just a hand wave. And I know he's attempted to do a lot more than that, and I think I kind of have some sympathy with that. I mean, certainly not all of the theories that we look at are kind of, we can just sort of dismiss as a hand wave, but I think some of them can be, really, if we're being slightly rude.
Thank you. Yes, I've often joked that if we could take the people who created the top theories and lock them in a room and said, you cannot leave until you come up with kind of a more cohesive theory that's actually addressing all of these aspects of consciousness. So who knows? Maybe that's going to be the 2025 Linda's Prize Boot Camp. So thank you so much. I'm going to ask the same question of Michal now. You have about 6 minutes. Would you like me to say the question again, or?
No, I think that's fine. So I will take a twofold approach, starting with some practical considerations. As I highlighted already in my essay, I think it's really important to work with gifted individuals. And also, as you defined it, as the IONS team who issued the call about non-local consciousness and how you define it, as you know from my essay, I virtually treated psi phenomena equivalently to non-local consciousness phenomena, because I think that's really at the heart of it all. It doesn't really help to make intelligent theories about consciousness and the brain when they cannot account for psi phenomena, telepathy, psychokinesis, and so on. So we have to start from the strongest and the weirdest phenomena to create a meaningful theory, and not from the small bits which are difficult by themselves, of course. So I really would focus on parapsychological phenomena and make a real thing out of it, that parapsychology has very, very important things to do and to contribute to the science of life and to the science of consciousness. So this is why I would suggest kind of a screening for gifted individuals, people who can perform PK, telepathy, and so on. And it's very interesting to see that these people are out there. Just read the proceedings of the Parapsychological Association, of the convention that we held in Merida. There were several papers in which researchers addressed people who did PK, people who did out-of-body experiences, people who were apparently able to see without eyes and do some clairvoyant stuff. So I think that would really be important, to work with gifted individuals and to invest money and time to find them and to design rigorous scientific, technical, experimental setups to assess under which conditions is it possible to elicit them, and so on and so on. I think there's very much that could be done if only we had the money and the researchers and the individuals to do so. Then there is another field that I personally am interested in. It's all the field of near-death context. So there's some phenomena I am currently researching, and that's not being researched a lot. It's people in comatose states, coma experiences. I do believe that there are many people out there who are in a coma and who are fully conscious without anybody knowing this. And I think it's very important for a number of reasons to precisely assess under which circumstances is it possible to be consciously aware, also under which brain conditions is it possible to be consciousness aware, what role does the brain and the brain's physiology play in all these cases. So there's really very interesting material about this, but it's little known and there's so little research about it. But I think it's really important to address these rogue phenomena or disturbing phenomena. This is where we will make the biggest progress. Then, speaking more about the theoretical approach, I also think that scientists need to be more prudent with regard to what they expect from scientific theories. If you look at theories of consciousness, you are in the paradoxical situation that you have to explain yourself. And this is virtually impossible from a systems theoretical approach already. You cannot explain a system by a system, especially if it's yourself. So I think we really need to be prudent, and we must be aware of the fact that we cannot apply the same scientific standards to consciousness studies that we apply to physicalist theories of whatever kind and whatever phenomenon. So this is also why I argue we do have very, very good theories about non-local consciousness, even though they lack precision, detail, replicable experiments, suggestions, whatever, because it's in the nature of the phenomena. Consciousness isn't like a stone that you can process repeatedly in the same way. So I really think that scientists need to be more aware of their philosophical concepts and frameworks they are working in. And if they do that, I think we should, or they should be more prudent and expect not so much from theories of consciousness. Maybe the human mind, human logic will not be able to fully explain consciousness, but that doesn't mean that that's a bad scientific theory. So that's just also a plea for more philosophy in science, which is severely lacking in my opinion in much of the publications about consciousness and yeah, so on.
Thank you. I just want to make one comment about your first point, and I think Mike and Chris talked about this too, this idea of finding the superstars. And so, we do see, and IONS proposes that everybody has the capacity to do psi in some way or tap into their intuitive gifts. And yet it really is on this normal curve. So there's some people out on the edge that are quite exceptional. And if we really want to discover how this works, then it does make sense to really bring those people in the lab and be able to look at mechanism and discover more about these theories. So that's not to say that there's only superstars and people who don't do it at all, but there really is this variation in terms of how these psi phenomenon can be expressed. So I want to now pass it on to Cameron to share what you think is the most important or impactful next steps to move the work forward.
Thank you. So I'm obviously a very young early career professional, and I did this project in complete isolation and just by myself. And I can see that joining forces with others and more experienced researchers is definitely going to be the way to go moving forward. So we're not siloed into our own theories and ideas, but we can expand and integrate with each other. Really, though, I see the path forward being brightest when we overcome, or we come up with solutions for the 2 F's that I talked about in my presentation: filtration and free will. So filtration, reducing that logical and analytical part of the brain that limits our access to the greater reality and that universal consciousness, basically where I think that's the area where a lot of those psi phenomena are going to reside. And so non-ordinary states of consciousness solves that filtration issue. So moving forward, I see that research needs to explore, it needs to optimize, and it needs to employ methods of facilitating non-ordinary states of consciousness so that we can reduce the activity in the default mode network, that we have that filtration, we're able to bypass it. And so we get this in a lot of studies like trance channeling. I mean, trance itself, that's a great way to describe non-ordinary state of consciousness. And I currently work in the world-leading research lab for clinical hypnosis. So we're working with states of non-local consciousness all day, every day. And I think if we were to just combine that with more direction to looking at these psi phenomena or phenomena that support non-local consciousness, that's where the magic is going to happen. And like it was being mentioned here, we can draw from people who aren't necessarily identified as gifted individuals, because everyone has that ability. It's just how much we filter it or how much we're able to shift into a state of consciousness that allows us to have access to those abilities. So I see that perhaps coming up with that optimized method of reaching that non-local state of consciousness is going to really enhance the research, because then we can use a larger pool, a larger population of participants to still yield wonderful results of these types of phenomena. So we have different methods right now for that non-ordinary states of consciousness, like meditation, like hypnosis, like psychedelic substances. The other one I want to shift over to, the second of the two F's, free will. So when we are looking at all these different conscious units, both within the person that we might be testing and whatever the target stimulus might be, we're dealing with these conscious units, these separate entities. And so I see that a head-to-head study is going to be helpful to really put against each other all the different, I guess, conditions and tasks of parapsychology, of psi phenomena, to see, even if we take from a pool of talented individuals, is there a certain set of conditions or a certain research task that we can set up that seems to yield the most reliable and most compelling results? And if that's the case, we can likely assume that the different parts of free will and the conscious units that are associated with that task are compliant to the task happening. And so we can kind of play around to see, okay, which task under which conditions is going to yield the best results based on the free will that we're having to balance and work with as we're testing these things. So like I said, it's a head-to-head study of different psi tasks under different conditions. You have perhaps a pool of people who are already gifted or have a high propensity for those abilities, and you see which one is going to yield the best results. And so to wrap it up, I'm excited about these things. I think that as we move forward and we optimize the approach of helping people reach a non-ordinary state of consciousness, and we're doing it with under the umbrella that we are dealing with other bits of free will, conscious units, separate entities, and being able to work collaboratively with that, that's going to push the field forward. I'm going to put my email in the chat because I would love to hear feedback from folks. And if people are interested in teaming up, that's the dream there. And I know that all of our papers are going to be posted to the IONS website. I know that some people have been asking about that. So that's another place to find us. But there you go.
Great. Thank you so much, Cameron. So as we kind of bring this panel to a close, I'm very curious about your thoughts on accessibility. And so that was something that was so striking on the judging committee in terms of how accessible each of the reviews were. And as people review them on the website, they'll definitely notice the differences in them. And so I'm curious about your thoughts on that. Like, how important is it for us to be able to translate some of these theories, some of these concepts in a way that is accessible and digestible to the curious layperson? And so I would ask each of you to maybe briefly comment on that, and then share with us if you have any final words of wisdom, or closing comments that you'd like to leave us with. So I'll go backwards again and start with Cameron.
Yes. So accessibility was really what I wanted to emphasize in my submission. So I really deviated from traditional scientific paper and scientific writing. And so there's a lot of like drawings and diagrams, and it's really colorful and hopefully easy for people to digest, because I found as I was going through it, even though I have a PhD in clinical psychology, I was getting lost a lot of the times, especially when it was a lot more scientific or quantum-based theories. And so me struggling with that, trying to boil it down so that it was readable for the educated public, that was probably the biggest hurdle I had to overcome in the preparation of this project, but something that in the end I really pride myself in, and how it turned out with being very accessible and accessible, with that, I chose to use an online resource, which was a 35-minute long video to be a little more engaging. And I know that the video format might be easier for people to run with and to comprehend. So that was in an effort to increase that digestibility. That was an effort that I made. And so that'll also be available in the overall submission that people can have access to. And my final thought is moving forward, this is really exciting. And I see that there's a lot of crossroads coming in together, that the more that we're able to combine our intellect and our ideas, that's what's going to help propel the field forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Cameron. Michael, how about you? Oh, you just have to unmute yourself there. Sorry, we can't hear you.
Okay, now? Okay. I found that rather difficult, that challenge, because I like to dig into the details, and I thought one way of presenting all the material in an accessible or enticing form was choosing to write about interesting stuff, and what I find fascinating and are these parapsychological phenomena. I'm always very interested in the history of parapsychology and all these things, but I'm not so sure if the general audience shares all that interest. So I did my very best, also with the help of Karen Wehrstein, because I'm not even a native speaker. I found it difficult to find the right words and to formulate it in such a way that the general audience might be interested in it. But I think with the help of Karen, I did fairly well, at least for my standards. And I think even though my essay goes into quite some detail, it is written in a style that is understandable even for a 12th grade person. But I admit it was a challenge. So my hope is that or my approach was to emphasize that in order to make progress, we need to look at the details. It's not sufficient to just write something for the general audience and stay on the superficial level, because that's, you find books and maybe treatises on that already. So my aim was to really provide something new, to combine new thoughts, to present things in a way that have so far not been presented in this context, even on the expense that it might be a little technical or too detailed in some respects. But we'll see how the readership will judge my essay in this regard.
And any final words you'd like to leave us with today?
Well, thank you very much again. It was a great experience, a great honor, and I learned a lot myself, because I had all these different thoughts in my mind already, and to combine them in novel ways and to add new things and so on, to compose all that stuff together in one coherent form, it was a very exciting and rewarding experience also for myself that brought some clarity into all the things circling around in my head. And I hope to be able to even provide more clarity into all these things that I am concerned with in these respects. Who knows what the future brings, but I think it was a very good starting point, and also the entire contest and the topic that IONS chose was very excellent and may hopefully serve as a starting point to take all this further.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. And now, last but not least, we have Mike and Chris.
So in terms of accessibility, I just want to share, I'm not sure how relevant this is, but I want to share. So obviously during this process, I've been talking to friends and relatives about it, when they say, what are you up to? And I say, well, I've got my head deep in an essay about consciousness. And they say, well, what's that all about? And a friend of mine who is scientifically trained said to me, I tried to explain it, and I tried to explain it in an email. And he said, well, the thing is, I'm not sure what consciousness is, and I'm not sure why it's a mystery. And I went further, and I tried to explain it a bit more, talking about what we call qualia, the sound of a skylark. Why does, all the itchiness of an itch and so on. And he said, well, sound of a skylight. Well, I've always assumed that's just something to do with the ear and the brain. I mean, why is that a mystery? So, and it kind of made me realize that, and I think maybe it's to do with left brain thinking and right brain thinking. I'm a big fan of Ian McGilchrist. I don't know, you know, people have followed his work, but I realize that people who are thinking left brain, and maybe this is some of the neuroscientists and people who are behind physicalist theories of consciousness, perhaps they don't even think that any of this is a mystery. And this is something that I think maybe we even have a sort of translation issue between people thinking, you know, well, what's the issue? I mean, it's just the brain. Why you know, what? Not even understanding why we think it's a mystery or why we think it's difficult. So that's somewhat related to accessibility, but it's a slight tangent, I know. Chris.
Yeah, I can jump in. It made me, when you posed the question, Helena, it made me reflect back on myself as a 14-year-old kid. So I've been doing parapsychology for about 35 years now, and can trace that back to having those fundamental questions to ask. You know, who am I? What is it to be a conscious being? What's my purpose in life? And everybody is struggling, very many people are struggling with exactly those questions. And so if there's anything that I can do to help others to shed light for themselves, to make sense of and integrate information for themselves, the better, I think, going forwards, really. So although I agree with Michael that, you know, some aspects of the questions are quite technical and require technical answers, there has to be a way to translate that material in a way that benefits others, that allows them to maybe think of themselves differently and maybe change the way they interact with other people. Fundamentally, I hope that that's one of the things that it will do, change the way we think of others and how we should relate to each other.
That's great. Thank you. Any last words either of you would like to share?
I was going to go back to Cameron. I think it may sound a little bit trite, but I think with a competition like this, everybody is a winner. And there's very much a sense that we can each learn, I think, after today from reading each other's essays, first of all, and looking for ways to build on this together so that we can shed light on the phenomenon. I think that's really important. So I think that would be the takeaway for me, is to emphasize coordination, collaboration, working together.
Thank you. That's a beautiful point to end this panel on. Congratulations again, all of you. Just deep gratitude for your incredible work. I think this is really going to support many people in understanding these theories more deeply and potential next steps for us to move the work forward. So now I'd like to pass it on to our president, Thomas Brophy, who will share some words.
Okay, thank you, Helene. Let's see, am I on screen now? Yes. Thank you, Helene. And I really want to congratulate the winners again. Really great work. Thank you for sharing it with us today. And I want to thank Linda G. O'Brien and congratulate IONS. Congratulate IONS ourselves for having the foresight to create this Linda G. O'Brien Prize series. Because there really is a quiet revolution going on in the foundations of science itself now. This revolution is to include consciousness into our modern scientific models of how reality works for the first time ever. For the past 100 years, the barrier to doing this integration has been because the scientific community has been suffering from a sort of dogma of physicalism, which was really a hangover, in my view, from the classical physics model of the world, in which psi phenomena in the classical physics model, and even consciousness itself, can't have any sensible existence on the classical physical worldview. Then 100 years ago, quantum physics was discovered to be at the foundation of the physical world. And quantum physics shows us that there is an opening in the causal structure of the physical world. So that gives us the importance of this year's prize challenge being to explicate for us the existence of the many excellent candidates for non-physicalist theories of consciousness that are out there. And our prize winners have really done a great job of that for us. So this powerful combination of modern scientific method and ancient esoteric experiential practices, it could prove to become the most profound cultural changes in 500 years. If we don't pay attention and marshal all of our efforts in this direction, those changes, may end up happening to us. Instead, through the efforts of this Lineage Bryant Prize series and the type of great work exhibited by our prize winners today, the profound challenges will happen with us. Profound changes will happen with us, and in part through our participatory efforts by us for the betterment of humanity. And that's the goal of IONS. So we will be active explorers into this vastly expanded domains of reality that this new science opens up, explorers like Edgar Mitchell on the moon in my background image. So thank you again, and congratulations to our winners and to every one of us here today, engaged in and supporting these very important efforts. So now it's my privilege to be able to pass the microphone to our IONS board chair, Claudia Wells, who has been critical in bringing these Lineage Bryant prizes to fruition. Claudia.
Thank you, Thomas. Wow, what a day. I'm just going to close our program. I want to start with just 3 brief takeaways that really resonated with me. There was so much, but 1, engage physicalists. 2, with the understanding that studying consciousness is not like studying a stone. And 3, teaming up is the dream. We may have had some people new to IONS in I think we were several hundred people. So I want to remind us that since our beginning 50 years ago, IONS has been democratizing access to a growing body of evidence, knowledge, and experience, challenging the status quo over and over again by providing extraordinary evidence to support what's viewed by mainstream science as extraordinary claims regarding the full extent of human potential, the true interconnected nature of reality, and the fundamental nature of consciousness. In describing the need for a global mind change decades ago, Willis Harman said he believed that much of what we collectively believe is true, perhaps even scientifically true, is a false belief, made difficult to check because everyone's holding the same belief and our interconnected minds keep confirming the same view of reality. If you've joined this program, you're probably also noticing that underneath a consensus reality built on materialism, which is really just a story we're telling ourselves, underneath an increasingly fragile veneer of the modern world's status quo, what we collectively believe is changing at an accelerating rate. Because while mainstream or materialism can tell us all about matter, it can't tell us why we matter. And we're seeing the consequences of this crisis of meaning continuing to intensify in the world today. The projects being supported by the Linda G. O'Brien Noetic Sciences Research Prize will contribute to an accelerating rate of scientific breakthroughs and accelerate the needed global mind change that Willis Harman called for IONS to help lead. As IONS continues to provide vital funding for the work of noetic scientists, breaking the boundaries of the brain, we know that's just the beginning, because all kinds of boundaries that limit the expression of our full potential as a species and as individuals, of course, will break as our worldview shifts to a paradigm of interconnectedness, where consciousness is not just within us, but where we're within consciousness. That is what you are making possible by supporting IONS. So I'd like to add my thanks on behalf of the entire IONS Board of Directors, first and foremost, to all of our IONS supporters. Thank you to our amazing winners, to all of our entrants, to all our presenters today, and to our production team and staff. Special thanks to our prize jury and our board prize panel. And of course, thank you to board member Linda O'Brien for helping IONS and the Noetic Sciences make history. Pain pushes until vision pulls. And Linda's visionary generosity is creating a pull to, in Edgar Mitchell's words, make better sense of it all as new experiments in science provide new understandings of humankind and our place in the cosmos for the benefit of all life and of all consciousness. This is the revolution in science that Edgar called for and that IONS has been bringing about for 50 years and continuing now with Thomas Brophy joining our team. Thank you for all each of you do to advance our common mission and for joining our program today. Back to you, Andrea.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Claudia. What beautiful words to end on, and just really loving seeing the emojis, the comments, everyone who came on this webinar, and whatever way that you're supporting this research and the mission of IONS. We are so grateful for you. And we invite you to visit noetic.org/give to make a special gift or become a member today if you're not already, and just really soak in the goodness of this event. Thank you again to our winners, to Linda, and to everyone who made this possible. So we'll be sending out a recording as well as links to all of the papers so you can continue the conversation. Thank you again, and until next time. Thanks, everyone.